Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to welcome you all to the last EBPA policy webinar of the year. Today's topic is Just Transition, Investing in Climate Neutrality while Safeguarding Social Inclusion. My name is Bianca Polidoro. I am the EBPA Policy Manager, and I will be moderating this webinar together with my colleague Catalina Papari, EBPA Policy Associate. Given the high level of participation to today's session, we have over 150 registered participants. We will be keeping the participants to the webinar muted in order to avoid any noise. But we encourage you all to raise any questions you might have. You can find the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can write your questions in the questions section at any point. Please do not forget to clearly mention to whom you would like to address it. If for some reason your question has not been answered during the webinar, feel free to contact us via email, and we will ensure the necessary follow-up. Last but not least, note that this session is being recorded, so you will soon be able to watch the recording and consult this presentation on EBPA website. Now that these housekeeping details are clear, let me give you a quick word about the European Venture Philanthropy Association. EBPA is a membership organization currently gathering more than 300 members from all across Europe that are interested in or are practicing venture philanthropy and social investments. Our members include foundations, social investors, academics, financial institutions, and service providers. Our policy work relies on two pillars. First, as thought leader within the impact space, EBPA monitors and communicates important developments in the sector at the European and national level, and voices the concerns and expectations of its network to policymakers. Second, as catalyst, EBPA connects relevant stakeholders and facilitates the conversation and collaboration between them on key policy topics. Through our policy webinar series, we have reached many people since 2014, connecting policymakers and practitioners around key policy developments such as social impact bonds and InvestEU program. If you are interested in these topics, all recordings and presentations are available on our website. At the end of this webinar, a short survey will pop up on your screen. We would greatly appreciate if you could take 2 minutes to fill this in. It is also an opportunity to let us know about a specific policy topic you would like us to address in our 2021 policy webinar series. So don't hesitate to grab it. Today's topic is Just Transition, Investing in Climate Neutrality while Safeguarding Social Inclusion. We will discuss this topic with 5 great speakers. Let me thank and introduce them. Risto Raivio, Senior Expert in European Commission's Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. Paula Ruiz, Mandate Officer of Social Impact Programs Developing and Implementing EU Financial Instruments in the European Investment Fund, EIF. Isabel Blanco, Associate Director, Energy and Environment Economist in the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD. Boan Scilla, Impact Investment Manager for Dun Participatis, the investment arm of the Dun Foundation. Vincent Reuter, CEO at iWell. Welcome all. We will start the webinar with an overview on the Just Transition mechanism and social inclusion in the context of the European Green Deal by Risto Raivio. Then Paula Ruiz will delve in the social impact finance within the Green Deal framework. After these 2 interventions, we will have the first Q&A, during which we will address your questions on the panel to the panelists. I would like to encourage you to write your questions in the chat from the beginning. Once the first Q&A is over, Isabel Blanco will explain the work of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development in fostering the green economy transition. Last but not least, Boan Scilla and Vincent Reuter will share some practitioner experiences on social inclusion within the energy space. We will end this webinar with another Q&A session moderated by my colleague Catalina Papari, followed by an EBPA conclusion. Before giving the floor to our first speaker, I would like to bring your attention on the EBPA series of interviews on investing in climate neutrality and social inclusion, launched last November. The EBPA policy team conducted these interviews with 5 high-level EU representatives from the European Commission, DG Employment, DG Grow, DG Regio, the European Investment Fund, and the European Investment Bank. After today's webinar, I suggest to take a look to the EBPA policy webpage for a deep dive reading on EU just transition towards climate neutrality and which role the social investors, especially the investor for impact, can play within the European Green Deal strategy. Now, let's start with our first speaker. Risto, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving the floor. Thank you for the invitation. It is a pleasure for me to be with you and share this moment with you with this very important topic today. It's a pleasure to be in the seminar organized by EBPA. I am currently working in this unit which is coordinating the implementation of European Social Fund in DG Employment, and in that context also dealing with the Just Transition Fund time to time. But during many years, until middle of this year, I was working on social economy, social enterprise issues, and there in many occasions in cooperation with the EBPA, and so it's a pleasure for me to participate in an event that you are hosting. So let's go to next slide, and here indeed what I would like to underline first is the kind of the nature of the European Green Deal. It's very important to remember as a starting point that European Green Deal is actually it is the overarching economic framework and strategy for the European Union. So it's not basically an environmental policy tool, it is really an economic strategy document. It really provides the overarching framework in which different European Union policies then place and are situated. The transition towards a green, climate neutral economy and society, as well as a transition to digital, they are really the core stones currently of the economic strategy and policy of the European Union. And this overarching nature means that different instruments that European Union has, they also have to contribute to financing the transitions. And therefore also European cohesion policy, including European Social Fund, has a role to play in kind of facilitating the transition. And it means actually a double role. On the other hand, facilitating the transition happening, but then also mitigating the social and societal impacts that the transition sometimes causes. Now, in this context, then, this picture shows a kind of very comprehensive plan that European Commission presented in January this year, how to mobilize about 1 trillion of investments to this Green Deal transition. And in that context, then, the Just Transition mechanism is one piece in the picture. So if we are overall mobilizing about 1 trillion, that was the figure presented in January. In that context, Commission presented about 100 billion to be allocated to the specific mechanism of Just Transition mechanism. Now, as you know very well, the figures are very much a moving target. Co-legislators are still negotiating about the different figures, but so these figures that you see here, they were were those that were presented in January this year. There is fine-tuning happening, but the big picture is still right. Now we can go to the next one. And so the just transition mechanism in this overall big picture, it is a mechanism that has a very specific role, and it has three key pillars. And those three pillars have again a kind of complementary nature. So Just Transition Fund is a specific fund that is kind of closely coordinated and aligned with the cohesion policy, and it provides grants to regions which are specifically affected by the transition to climate neutral economy and society. And then in addition to that, the middle pillar is a specific scheme in the InvestEU mechanism or fund, and there the biggest key feature is that it is like the other part of InvestEU fund also. They are mobilizing private investments to specific goals, and in this case again mobilizing private investments to enable the transition to happen. And then finally, the third pillar is EIB public sector loan facility, which is then mobilizing public investments again to help the transition happen and to manage the transition in the best possible way. We can go to next one. Now, as I said, the Just Transition mechanism is one piece of the picture, and again, the different pillars here, they are complementary to other tools that are already also available and used in the EU context. Therefore, the specific added value of the Just Transition mechanism comes from the fact that it's a very targeted instrument. It's geographically targeted, and it is also then focusing on specific measures, so that it is both, let's say, it is focusing on the regions where those sectors are particularly present, which are affected by the transition, and then it is specifically focusing on the measures that are needed in this context. Now, it is important that in addition to enabling the transition to happen in terms of investments that are, for example, helping the industrial structures to change, that we are also mitigating and facing the societal impacts that transition affects, and that is the just dimension in this mechanism. It's really about also helping people and specific groups that are particularly affected by the transition. And in that part then comes into picture the fact that within the Just Transition mechanism, the Just Transition Fund as one of the pillars, it provides an additional boost of investment in those regions that are targeted by this mechanism. But then in those regions still, the mainstream EU financial instrument in the area of social investment, the ESF, remains in the picture. We can go to next slide actually there. And in the, sorry, technical problem for myself. Yes, and in more broader picture, the transition is of course affecting also other regions, other parts of the member states, which are not the specific target regions of the Just Transition Fund. And also in those regions, we have to enable the transition to happen. And also in those regions, we have to face the consequences of the transition. And the European Social Fund is really the major instrument that member states have available to mitigate the transition. Of course, job creation and then skills that are needed in the transition, they are a kind of core. In this kind of debate, we always come to skills. However, the picture is broader. There is also a need for active labor market measures that go beyond skills. You have also social protection and inclusion measures, because there are situations where people are not able to find another job, even if the skills issues would be addressed. I have also mentioned here in this slide the role that social economy and social enterprises can play, because kind of civic participation dimension is also important in terms of keeping society, communities alive in the transition situation in these regions that are specifically addressed by the transition. I think I will stop the introduction here, and we can come back to your questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Risto. And I would like to remind to all of you that you can already write your question in the chat. And now, please, Paula, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bianca. So first of all, thank you very much for having invited the EIS to this interesting webinar. And of course, thanks to EBPA as well for your work, for being a vehicle to share good practices and to strengthen and inspire the social investment community. So through this 10-minute presentation, I'm going to guide you through the social impact programs we have been managing, but also how they are connected and interlinked with environmental opportunities and initiatives. I would also like to mention what we have been doing in the field of clean tech and how we are planning to increase our efforts in the field to promote the transition towards a low carbon economy. So next slide, please. Very quickly, for the ones that are not familiarized with EIS type of activity, we operate in an intermediated model. So this means that although we have our own resources, we are focused on implementing the mandates that different institutions entrust us, mainly the EIB, the Commission, local authorities and MPIs and other investors. Hence, we are in charge of implementing financial instruments that address EU policy priorities. Then what we try to do is we roll out products to the market through equity and debt risk sharing instruments that target the funding gaps that the mandators have identified. And for that, we enter into operations with financial intermediaries. So far, we have been working with more than 600 funds and 400 banks. And thanks to this process, we finance mainly SMEs, but also mid-caps. And we transform, on average, each euro of public resources into 5 euros actually invested in final recipients. Next slide, please. So our product offering in the field of social impact is channeled through 3 flagship programs that offer a wide range of products and that are managed by people dedicated to 2 main areas: inclusive finance and impact investing. So in the inclusive finance arena, we have 3 instruments. We have the EC Guarantee Facility that provides financial intermediaries with partial credit risk protection that incentivizes intermediaries lending, mainly to newly originated loans to eligible final recipients, being them micro and social enterprises. Then we have the EC funded instrument. It's a fund that provides senior and subordinated loans to financial intermediaries to bridge their liquidity gap. And this applies in turn on lends to the same eligible beneficiaries as with a guarantee. And finally, the EC Capacity Building Pilot that enables investments in organizational development and expansion or increasing indebtedness capacity of FIs to build up and reinforce their institutional capacity. Then in the previous slide, thank you. So in the field of impact investing, thanks to EFSI and thanks to SIA, we also have 3 types of products. We have the equity investments in impact venture capital funds. We have equity investments in funds linked to accelerators and incubators, and payment by results investment schemes. Now, next one, please. Okay, so as you've heard, our product offering entails an interesting mix. And in this graph, you can see how our activities are spread across the value chain, or taking into account the development stage of the companies. We are supporting companies from the very early stage, from the pre-seed and seed phase to scale-up phase and late development. Currently, we are in an interim period, so we are finalizing the implementation of the products under the current MFF, and we are planning the successor products. So for sure, this second generation of final instruments will need to take into account the scale, the diversity of social impact ecosystem as of today, the lessons learned thanks to the implementation of the first generation of instruments, as well as the new challenges in the green, in the digital, and in the human capital fields. Next slide, please. So in a snapshot, you can see which are the overall results of the programs I've just described. We have delivered more than 1.3 billion dedicated to microfinance and social enterprise finance. We have committed more than 900 million to FIs, enabling more than 2.8 billion, financing more than 145,000 companies. We have managed to ensure a wide geographical outreach, so we have covered all EU member states except Cyprus and Malta, plus then Albania, North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Turkey. And we have enlarged the ecosystem by supporting not only mature markets, but also nascent and emerging ones through a wide range of intermediaries. And before I jump into the clean tech vertical, as I anticipated, I wanted to mention that through our impact investing pilot, we are not only pursuing social impact, but also environmental one. And I just wanted to mention as well a couple of examples of companies that have been financed through these social impact programs, but that were pursuing as well environmental impact. And this is, for example, the case of EcoAlf, whose tagline is there is no planet B. And what they are doing is they're working with fishermen that collect plastic from the sea. They recover the material, they process it, and then they transform it into garments and fashion, which has a better environmental footprint. Or another example is Codician, who is a social enterprise that uses disruptive technologies such as drones, AI, in order to collect large amounts of data and help farmers to maximize their output in an ecological way. Next slide, please. So in the Clean Tech Fund, EIF has been the most active LP of the decade in the venture capital space. So since 2006, we have committed more than 600 million into 25 sustainability-focused funds, reaching and supporting more than 280 companies. What we expect from 2021 onwards is that our efforts and our, let's say, activity in the venture capital sphere is going to be focused, 1/3 of it, into climate and environmental funds, let's say. So until here, I've described what we have done so far. What's coming next and directly related to the transition to a low carbon economy, and of course, very importantly, the inclusion and justice of this transition in this slide, yeah. So here on the left-hand side, I have highlighted 3 major challenges that SMEs may face in the transition to a low carbon economy. So for sure, there's a cluster of SMEs in energy intensive sectors that risk to become stranded because maybe their technologies are not able to, for example, reach the thresholds stated in the EU taxonomy, or because they're operating in sectors that are no longer, let's say, valid for a low carbon economy. Of course, the employees of these high polluting industries risk to lose their jobs. So this will require a massive shift in job profiles, a massive shift or a massive investment into reskilling. And as a general challenge, we are seeing that there is an increasing pressure on companies in general, but for sure in SMEs to enhance their ESG profile, to take care of the ESG risks and to enhance the reporting regarding this. And we want to avoid imbalances because maybe big companies are more used to this type of reporting, to this type of scrutiny, and we need to help SMEs to transition as well to this new framework. On the other hand, of course, micro enterprises and SMEs will remain the backbone of the European economy, and they will be key not only for job preservation, but also to drive the transition on the ground. And we have proved, thanks to these programs and thanks to other programs, that micro enterprises and social entrepreneurs are also key to provide with innovative, agile, and often prevention-based solutions for societal issues. So, the conclusion of this slide is that no matter how fast we have to move, and actually we have to move very fast, we need to ensure inclusiveness for these SMEs, inclusiveness for these workers. So it's essential, at least from our perspective, from our point of view, to develop instruments that allow everyone to participate in the transition, to keep on lifting the barriers for existing and future entrepreneurs. So we need a just transition. Next slide, please. So what we are going to do from the EIF can be divided more or less into two levels. The first one at institutional level and the second one at product development level. So last month in November, the EIB group approved and published its climate pact roadmap, which entails a series of very ambitious measures, among them becoming Paris aligned as of 2021, or unlocking 1 trillion euros of climate action and environmental sustainability investments by the end of 2030. Then at product development level, we aim to implement a green toolbox under the upcoming InvestEU programs. I'm afraid I cannot disclose more details because we don't have them so far, but we envisage to still carry out the same type of support and instruments that we have done so far. So through guarantees, through capital, through venture capital and private equity, and this newly instrument that will be rolling out from 2021 onwards, the climate and infrastructure funds, we aim to support different sectors in the environmental and green investments. We see here the 4 verticals: renewable energy and energy efficiency, sustainable transport, sustainable food and environmental services, and sustainable infrastructure, industries, products, and services. And of course, horizontally, we will still support the social segment. We envisage to extend our skills and education program to support these workers, but all the people and all the organizations that want to enhance their education and their skills. And of course, we will, with the second generation of social impact programs, we will keep on supporting micro enterprises and social entrepreneurs. Next slide, please. So in the end, we aim to impact not only on companies, but also on people and citizens through these reskilling opportunities, thanks to the improvement of energy efficiency in buildings, and indirectly, for sure, member states and regions through the investments, for example, thanks to the infrastructure funds. And final slide, please. So here you can see, and you will be able to access through a QR code to 5 videos with case studies of companies that are contributing positively to social and environmental challenges, not only financed through our social impact programs, but through other generalist programs as well. And to finalize, I think that taking into account our commitment with EU policy priorities, the interest of our mandators to increase available resources towards climate action. Our commitment as EIB group, we expect that the EIF will play a pivotal role in contributing to the EU Green Deal. And I hope that in the upcoming webinars, when we are able as well to disclose the details of our future programs, we can also present more case studies and that successful and innovative SMEs can lead us to the transition towards a low carbon and for sure inclusive economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula, for this detailed presentation. Actually, we can start our first Q&A session. We have already some very good questions, and the first one is for Risto. How much the COVID pandemic has influenced the nature of the European Green Deal?
Thank you. I would say that the basic understanding of the necessity and power of the Green Deal, it has probably not changed that nature of this Green Deal. It has probably still underlined even more strongly the importance of the social aspect in this context, in the transition. We know that the pandemic has it is not an equal by nature. It affects people in different way, and those who are in a vulnerable situation in society have been in many cases affected worse by the pandemic and the kind of indirect consequences of the pandemic. And this is very much kind of understood, and there's kind of political. How would I say that there is even stronger political focus on the social aspects. They have been very much. There's been a strong focus on social aspects since many years now at the European level, but the pandemic has only increased that focus.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for your answer. We have another question for Paula. Paula, what would you suggest to social investors which are already investing in the social inclusion within the energy space and they are interested in collaborating with the EIF for the first time?
To contact us. I mean, and luckily, as I was explaining before, we're in an interim period. We're finalizing our current instruments. We are in the process of ensuring the second generation. But we are expecting to have soon as well volumes to be able to keep on investing in social enterprises and in impact-driven enterprises through, as I've said, payment by result investment schemes, through impact venture capital funds, and through funds linked to incubators and accelerators. So I mean, happy to discuss and happy to engage with them.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a very interesting answer. Risto, there will be a link between the InvestEU Just Transition Scheme and the European Social Fund Plus.
They are complementary by nature, as I presented. In technical terms, what is going to be exactly as kind of products under this InvestEU scheme, there I am not informed in details, and I know colleagues. I talk to colleagues who are working on this, and they are still in the process of being shaped. So I cannot provide a very technical answer, but basically what we are looking at always at EU level is the complementarity. European Social Fund is of course mainly working with grants. There are also financial instruments used in the context of ESF, but in the big picture, it is still mainly providing grants for actions by that kind of operations which by their nature don't generate incomes in terms that you could pay the financing back later, so not repayable funding. And on the contrary, what is launched via InvestEU is that kind of financial instruments which are repayable by their nature, so that in at a later stage you are paying back either it is a loans or they are direct investments, or and that is the big difference. Now, as I said, this kind of financial instruments, they have their place also in the context of ESF, but it is not a prominent part.
Okay, thank you very much for this explanation. We have another question for Paula. How we make sure to avoid impact washing when we invest in projects which are relevant for both ecosystems, social and environmental?
So what we do to ensure that we are not performing impact investing washing is that we are asking our fund managers to implement our impact performance methodology. So we link the carried interest of our fund managers with specific KPIs at company level. So they establish a target and we measure annually how the companies are achieving these KPIs. These KPIs are, let's say, identified together with the fund manager and the company. These KPIs are related to the business activity of the company, and then we track it. Hence, we ensure that the investments they are pursuing are aligned with our theory of change and have significant and meaningful impact on environmental positive outcomes.
Okay, thank you very much. This topic is very relevant for EBPA. Now I would like to start with the second part of our webinar, and I will leave the floor to Isabel Blanco from the EBRD. Thank you, Isabel.
Thank you very much, Bianca, for giving me the floor, and I'm delighted to be here today. Look, maybe I would like to start by saying that the approach I'm going to present today is a practical application on how the EBRD would go about just transition as it has been presented by Risto in his address. So, frankly speaking, we started thinking about the Just Transition Initiative, which is how we call our effort to address just transition issues in the EBRD. We started thinking about that about 2 years ago, so before the European Commission came with its Green Deal. It all started with the Katowice conference in Poland, a COP, 2 COPs ago. Katowice is in the middle, and Silesia is in the middle of a coal-dependent region, and there was a lot of talk in that moment about how the green economic transition would leave some people behind, and some very clear examples from coal miners. I remember there were a couple of demonstrations from miners outside of the COP complaining that the green economic transition was not looking after them, they would be left without jobs, and all these considerations. So we started thinking as an institution, what is it that we could do to address some of the challenges of the green economic transition, not leaving behind and protecting the vulnerable communities. The people who either work in those carbon-intensive sectors that need to be phased out as part of the green economic transition, or the local communities that live indirectly from those assets, not because they are employed directly by them, but because they are somehow in the value chain or in the same geographical location. So the Green Economic Transition and the Just Transition Initiative of the EBRD, which has been formally launched in May of this year, starts with those 2 inclusive and green priorities that we have in the bank, and provides an answer which actually is very similar to what the European Commission presented in January. And we have made further efforts to make sure we are fully aligned with those priorities. So if you move to the next slide, please. This slide shows you why just transition and decarbonization is very important and relevant in our countries of operation, including the social impact. And this is because our countries, which are the blue dots that you can see in the slide, are normally much more carbon intensive and coal intensive than the European Union or the world or many other metrics we may want to use. The EBRD invests in many Central Asian countries, the former communist countries in Europe and the Soviet Union countries, CEMED, which is the north of Africa, and Turkey. Some of these countries are large oil, gas, and coal exporters, and therefore they have a high exposure to carbon-intensive assets, coal and beyond. And some of these assets are profitable, but there is a large amount of assets which have become dilapidated and probably not cost-effective on a market basis. Many of them are today in public hands, and they are in public hands because, as I say, some of them cannot rely on their income to survive. And one of the reasons why they have not been closed is because they have jobs and the communities closely linked to them, and they pose a political and a social problem that needs to be addressed by society and politicians and us working in those regions. If you go to the next slide, yeah, that one. This only speaks about coal, and it's focused on the European Union and on the Western Balkans, which are two of the regions where we are investing the most. So the European Commission did a study not long ago where they looked into the job that was linked to coal assets, either mining, especially mining, and also power stations. As Risto was saying before, there's going to be a significant package of help for European regions that need to decommission and to move away from coal, helping them become greener and more diversified regions. The problem goes well beyond the European Union. I would point maybe for the purposes of this conference, the Western Balkans. The Western Balkans are our neighbors in Europe. They have very dilapidated assets, a lot of exposure to coal, mainly coal power stations, some of them 30, 40, 50 years old, and some mining activities. These assets are crying to be closed down. And if they are not, in many cases, as I say, is because of the political implications and the social impact that they may have. We face not exactly the same situation, but in some cases similar in other countries where we operate. In Kazakhstan, for example, in Uzbekistan, in the case of gas, Ukraine, so Central Asian countries which are very rich in carbon-intensive assets, some of them are facing the same pressures, and they are in the early stages of thinking how to go about the just transition, how to reorganize, shrink, maybe not close in many cases, but shrink the importance of those sectors in the economy, and what to do with the many people who are linked to those sectors, sometimes regionally, one way or the other. If we go to the next slide, please. This slide simply shows that before thinking and launching our Just Transition initiative, we made some thinking about what could we learn from past transitions, industrial transitions, some of them in the oil sector or in carbon-intensive sectors in the past, or other industrial sectors, what kind of things we could learn from them and could apply in our own benefit. So 3 types of conclusions we found. Strategic planning is important, and it seems obvious, but we learned through our historical analysis that in some cases, even if the assets or the sectors that were being reconverted had been declining over time, there had not been an active policy to plan in the long term for the change that was to come. And this was in some cases due to people not wanting to see the decline that was there, in other cases because of political and social pressures. So one thing we learned is that it's important to plan well in advance, even when the assets are not about to be closed, so that we can take a comprehensive approach. And also to involve all stakeholders, not only public, not only private. Social actors are very important, the people who are going to be affected, and also the people who can win from the changes, because in all those structural adjustments, there are some sectors that decline and there are other sectors that become more important. So we think it is crucial to involve everybody in society, those to lose and those to win, plus the public authorities at different levels, plus the private sector. Also about the institutional capacity. And I think this is very important actually, and particularly in some of our countries of operation. These changes are complex and they require strong and stable institutions that can pass on difficult messages sometimes and that are able to go through, to navigate through time and through difficult situations. So in some cases, the transition, not only this green economy transition, but many transitions fail because the institutional setup and stability is not there or dies midway. So strengthening the institutions and making them capable, giving them the tools to be able to navigate through the complexity of structural transformation, we think is important. And finally, the design of specific interventions. And here I'm not going to go through the list, but maybe one thing I would say is that there is not as they say in English, a one-size-fits-all solution, meaning that we saw different regions addressing the same problem in different ways, depending on which were their strengths in terms of regional development, what kind of skills were found in the population, what was their geographical location, and to what extent they could rely on nearby or neighboring regions which could attract part of the jobs that were being lost in the transition in that particular industry or sector, etc. So to make the most and to tailor really the responses depending on the starting point and the strengths and weaknesses of each of the regions involved. If we go to the next slide, please. These are the things that we propose to do in the context of the Just Transition Initiative of the EBRD. And I would like to tell you that our institution focuses mainly on private sector investment. And therefore, we are not going to work extensively with injecting money to the public authorities. It's more about creating job and sustainable economic opportunities and bringing investments that can survive over time and help create a new economic structure. We think we can do three things here. One is to support green growth. Some of the carbon intensive sectors will decline. There are many green opportunities for these regions to be grabbed. And this is linked to their decommissioning, decommissioning and repurposing of the assets that are in decline. But it is also about the growth of new green assets and new green opportunities, investments across many sectors, not only renewables. It could be sustainable tourism, it could be energy efficiency, it could be circular economy, recycling, water quality, and many other things. The second is about skills for the future. And I really liked what Paula had in some of the earlier slides she presented about how you prepare people to have skills that are relevant for the new jobs that are in the market. And the EBRD has got some very interesting work that we do in our inclusion strategy in providing and working with companies to give some of the training that is needed, new certifications for these people to be able to access the jobs. And finally, regional economic development, which is simply to help our regions diversify away from the coal and carbon intensive assets into other economic sectors that may be important for them and which will depend from region to region. It could be an SME line, women in business, some key infrastructure, the digital transformation. So attracting new businesses that create alternative economic opportunities. If we go to the next slide, the next one, please. That one. It is important, as Risto was saying before, to have a planning. The European Commission talks about the Just Transition plans. The Just Transition plans are strategic documents at the end of the day. And in the EBRD, we think we can help some of our regions go through this process of strategic thinking. So to look into the vulnerabilities, which are the vulnerable assets, what people can be left unemployed, and also look at the opportunities, which are the new areas that could grow in exchange. How are the energy sources going to be replaced? So in Europe, there's already a lot of work that has been done, and the European Commission is leading on that. So in Europe, we are simply helping and contributing to the discussion. But in other jurisdictions like the Western Balkans, Ukraine, and beyond, we think we can have a more active role and actually help the authorities draft and prepare those plans and have them done in an inclusive way, involving the people that need to have a say in those analyses. our just transition activities, the ones I mentioned before, would fall from this diagnostic and therefore would be linked to the broader picture. If we go to the next, please. This is a very practical example on how we think we can do the just transition. And I took the example of Greece because it is one of those where we started working more than a year ago. Greece has announced the closure of all their coal plants in a short period of time by 2023, including some of the coal plants that they had built very recently. They have a challenge and an opportunity ahead, more an opportunity than a challenge, I would say. They are closing some assets. They will need to reopen other assets. They will need to provide alternative economic opportunities for some of the people in the two regions which appear in red lines, which are the ones that are more coal dependent. We have been working with the authorities, with the European Investment Bank and with the World Bank and others to collaborate and see what is it that we can each of us finance in Greece in order to make this just transition plan work for them. So there's been a work of collaboration. The authorities have been good in pointing where do they think the opportunities lie in those regions, and us thinking and explaining how we think within our business model we can help these Greek regions move away from coal and embrace the green growth. Next slide, please. This is the final one. And it is just to say that we are not working in isolation. We keep a regular contact with the European Commission, as I said, but we are working also with other stakeholders, the World Bank, the Energy Community Secretariat. Tomorrow I am going to open a session which is the launch of the Just Transition platform in the Western Balkans and Ukraine. We have launched this in collaboration with the European Commission and with the World Bank. And it is a similar platform to the one that exists for Europe, but for those other regions which need to catch up and to apply some of the recipes and of the ideas that we have for the European Union. Internationally, we are leading some work with other multilateral development banks on how to define just transition, to make sure it means the same for all the institutions, and to come with a joint manifesto or a joint vision in the COP26 of London, so that we can in the future develop even joint programs together where it makes sense. And I think I will leave it here. I consumed my time and happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabel, for this very interesting and concrete presentation. I would like to remind the audience that if it's better if you write your questions in the chat and not in the questions box. Now, please, I would like to leave the floor to Bo-Ann and Vincent. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Bianca. My name is Bo-Anne. I'm investment manager for the Doen Foundation. So let me start off with an introduction of what we do. So in a nutshell, Doen Participaties is the investment arm of the Doen Foundation. And the Doen Foundation receives its funding from the Dutch charity lotteries. Our mission is to support startups with an innovative green or social business idea. Doen Participaties is the impact investment arm, so we provide convertible loans, equity investments, and fund-in-fund investments for these starting entrepreneurs in order to scale them. We work as a revolving fund, so everything that we earn, we reinvest. We have over 60 companies in our portfolio and more than 130 million assets under management. So we work on different themes. One of them is green. So we work on green, social, and creative fields. And within the green space, what we mean by that is circular entrepreneurship, sustainable food systems, and renewable energy. And so today I will speak a little bit about our approach regarding our renewable energy program, in which social inclusion is our core of our investment thesis. So within Doen, what we try to do is to make the energy transition social inclusive, so for everyone and not just for the people who are lucky enough to be homeowners, for example. So we have two parts. One part of our investments is in Europe, mainly the Netherlands. And what we try to achieve with our investments is to let everyone participate in the transition. Well, how do we do that? I wrote down two examples. One of the examples is zonnepanelen delen. They are a crowdfund platform that builds solar panel systems on large buildings, for example, schools or hotels. And then you can be partially owner of those solar panels, even if you don't have a roof yourself. Another one of our portfolio companies is Triple Solar. They created a heat pump just with warmth from the atmosphere and energy from the sun. And also their product is applicable for every type of household. Besides, oh, sorry, previous slide. Let me just quickly address also what we do outside the Netherlands. So we work in East Africa and India, and there we are working on energy access for everyone by solar home systems and microgrids, also on solar energy. Or an example is productive uses appliances, for example, solar irrigation pumps, which means farmers can irrigate their land with pumps on solar energy. Thanks. Yeah, so I was thinking what to present today, and I thought, well, let's keep it practical. So I came up with 5 tips for impact investing in the renewable energy space with social inclusion, according to the Doen Foundation, or how we have been working. So first of all, it's a new market. So we have to start early and help these startups grow, because a lot of them are very early stage. The solutions are still very novel and innovative. So let's start and take a risk. The second is support an ecosystem and not just your investments. And by that we mean also invest or look at accelerators or policymakers or anything else that helps these startups to achieve their goals. A third one is make sure that the product is designed for everyone, because when you start, the product might be quite expensive. That's always the case because you need skill in order to make it cheap. But as long as the end customer is the central part of your design, and that end customer is not a rich homeowner, but can be anyone, at least the start point is correct. The fourth one is think outside the box. You don't need to own products to use them. So for example, the zonnepanelen delen example that I just mentioned. And the fifth one is trust the transition. Exits will happen because sustainability is the new normal. And when we look at potential corporates or multinationals that in the end want to buy your startup, they will, there's no other possibility for them to also become more and more sustainability, as it is a topic we cannot go around anymore. It's a new future. So I think these are my 5 tips. I'm very proud to give the floor to Vincent, who is CEO of iWell, which is one of our portfolio companies. And I think a very, very good example of how you can combine transitioning to a green economy while also being social inclusive. So Vincent, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Boanne. Thank you for the opportunity to present myself and present iWell. We're one of the portfolio companies of Stichting Doen, and we have the goal to achieve clean and affordable energy for everyone. It's a big, ambitious goal, but it's something that is one of the biggest challenges of our modern time. And the energy transition is begging us for change, but many parties have endless conversations about what could and should be changed. But this all takes a very long time. So we try to do it differently. We try to accelerate the energy transition today by building today the energy supply of tomorrow. and to make the world today already a better place, but also a more cheaper place, cleaner and more sustainable. And we do that by, and how do we do that? Because the challenge we stand for as the energy transition is to get renewable energy at the right time, at the right place, but also at the right quantity. And to solve that mismatch problem of energy supply and demand, we have batteries that solve that problem. And we do that by different kind of batteries we developed, and one of our batteries is the Cube battery. One of our 4 batteries that save money but also save CO2 emissions. And we do that because we believe that the Cube battery system is the new heart of the smart heart of the new energy system. We do this, for example, for social household corporations that have a lot of apartment complexes, and their rentees of the social household corporations normally don't have a big wallet and don't have a lot of money to spend, but they have a huge impact because in 1/3 of the buildings are owned by social household corporations, for example, in the Netherlands. And in Europe, we see that number pretty much the same. So it has a huge impact, but not always a big wallet. So you have to save money in order to make it attractive for them as well. So what did we do? We made an innovation that is not only technical innovation, but also social innovation. So we made the battery nice to look at battery, something that you want to see in the hall of your apartment, in the hallway of your apartment, for example. So in that way, we make the energy transition visible. We make it possible for rentees to see what they are doing today already to make their energy supply more green, but also cheaper. And therefore, we get involvement of the customer and the tenant. The technical part is that we developed a battery system that is very fast in peak shaving. Too much in detail for now, but in milliseconds we deliver energy, and therefore we can make sure we can lower the grid and make sure that we don't need a big grid just for the peak moments. Therefore, we have a positive business case, not only solving the grid cost, but also doing energy trading with it. We make sure that you can lease the Cube, so it's cheap, so you don't have to do the investment, and the rest you can read it off. But the biggest challenge we stand for is not only delivering a system just for one building or one charging station or one apartment complex, but the big challenge is that we are building a community of all batteries that are combined with each other and that can deliver a solution not only for that building, but for a whole congestion area, and can create social value by that, by trading between the batteries, solar panels, charging poles, and therefore we get a social and financial return with the Cube. So you don't have to lay out all big cables just to get to renewable energy at the right time, at the right place, in the right quantity. And we do that with a small team, about 20 people in Utrecht, the Netherlands, in an old coal factory where we're building from the old world, the new energy world. And thank you for the time, and thank you for having the opportunity to shortly tell you a bit about how we try to make an impact.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Thank you, Isabel, and also Boan. It was very, very interesting to hear all the presentations that you brought today. We already have one question for you, actually, Vincent. Is IWEL present only on the Dutch market, and what are the future plans for IWEL? How do you intend to scale up your business? So a row of questions.
Yeah, at the moment we are only in the Netherlands, and we're scaling up quite fast at the moment because a lot of our clients started small but want to enroll it now to all of their real estate. So we're multiplying by 5 times this year, and and definitely next year even faster, and having plans also to go abroad, and abroad that we go to a few countries in Europe first.
Thank you very much.
First.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Isabel, can you hear us? I see that your micro is muted and I cannot unmute you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect, because we have two questions for you. What is the most challenging aspect the EBRD confronts with in Central and Eastern European countries for deploying the EU funds?
The EU funds are not available yet. As Risto was explaining before, if they mean the just transition, the EU Green Deal funds, including the just transition mechanism, they will be made available after submission of the GT plans later in 2021. So we are not yet in the stage where we are deploying funds from other institutions into our projects. And also, I would like to say, EBRD has got its own funds. So we provide our own funding. It's not only that we put money from other institutions through projects. We have our own capital and we finance projects from our own capital.
Great clarification, thank you. And also for you, which is the EU country you have the most successful collaboration with? Why that country and which were the success factors?
Again, maybe I didn't make this fully clear when I presented the initiative. This is something we are developing. We have recently developed. We started working a couple of years ago. As I said, we presented the full program in May this year. And there was a question before, I think, about how COVID has affected the European Commission's plan and so on. It has affected everybody, including us. So a lot of the Just Transition initiative is about new CapEx projects, new projects, replacement of old assets by new economic activity. In the current situation, I think some of the projects of the capital expenditure projects that were planned are put on hold until there is a bit more stability, macroeconomic stability. So we are having interesting conversations and we have financed a few projects which can be called just transition. For example, in Greece, the reconversion of a coal mine into solar. We have done another one in North Macedonia, in the Western Balkans. We have done we purchased some bonds from a Polish utility linked, where the payment of the bond was linked to the decarbonization of the company, which is a very interesting concept. So we have had some projects up to date, but I think the majority we're going to see in the next 2 or 3 years, or so is my expectation.
Okay, thank you very much. Bo-Ann, we have a question for you too. Have Stichting Doen ever collaborated with a EU institution, or do you intend to do it?
That's a great question, actually. Not yet, but we would be very happy to, and I'm learning more every day on what the EU has for possibilities. What I do know is that a lot of our startups are applying for EU funding under different program teams, and we, of course, loudly applaud that, but we haven't worked with them directly yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Isabel, back to you. So another question, how does the EBRD Green Finance commitments complement with the EIF support? And maybe here also Paula can say something. Can an investor attract funding for both types of institutions with no conflict of interest?
Thank you for the question. I was actually emailing privately Paula after her presentation because I found very interesting what the EIF is doing in the space of just transition, and honestly I was not following closely. I think one difference between the EIF and the EBRD is that the EBRD finances larger projects. So, well, we actually finance some smaller projects or small projects, which can be a few 100,000 or up to 1 or 2 million euros. We do this through what we call our intermediated finance lines. We lend money to national banks, to banks in a country, and they lend to their customers or new customers on the basis of a policy agreement. We tell them what kind of investments they can do with our money. And this is how we channel the money to small projects. If we do it directly for a bank like ours, it's like the EIB, the European Investment Bank, there needs to be some critical mass in terms of a minimum level of investment. So our money, we do very few projects which are less than 5 or 6 million euros. I think our average transaction is 30 to 40 million euros, and we have some that are several hundred millions. So I think one obvious difference is that we target bigger projects. And I leave to Paula if she's around to comment on the EIF projects.
Paola, would you like to add something, or we can address the last question in the chat at least? Okay, so the last question is for you, Boan. Does Dun Foundation combine the grants and loans with convertible loans, equity investments, and fund investments, or do you channel the investments separately through the foundation and through Dun Participație? If you maybe can explain a bit the way of investment one more time.
Yeah, sure. Good question as well. So basically, to recall, our mission is to help starting entrepreneurs with their green or social business idea to reach commercial scale. For different time in the life cycle of startup, different instruments are used. So the foundation provides the grants and the loans, and the investment arm provides the convertible notes and the equity. But ideally, an idea would start with a subsidy. So we would give a grant in order to find out if the idea is feasible, if it works. Then we could provide a loan to start market entry. And then only once the model is proven and market entry has been successful, we can give a convertible note or a direct equity investment. And as we are an impact investor, we are focused long term. So we don't have a closing date of our funds. So we can really be long-term partners of our investments. We don't have a specific exit date or so. So we can also do follow-on investments. Normally, sometimes we provide a loan to a company that we are also invested in already, but normally the different instruments are used in different phases. So I hope that clarifies your question a little bit. Otherwise, happy to elaborate a bit further.
Thank you very much. This was the last question. In the case you have other questions, you can address them on the email and we will come back to you after this webinar. Please let me now to draw up some conclusions after today's session. Of course, we want to thank you so much to all the participants for actively addressing all these questions, and many thanks to our speakers of today for their presentations and clear answers. It was a very interesting exchange of knowledge, useful for all of us to better understand the mechanism through which both public and private stakeholders can get involved in building a more inclusive and greener society. EBPA strongly believes that through collaboration with other private actors, but also with public sector and civil society, Investors for Impact can enhance the impact of their investment and mobilize a large number of actors to direct more resources towards the just transition. As Isabel from EBRD presented, there are many bridges already started to be built for this transition, besides the green finance commitment, such as offering technical assistance to private investors and enhance the interinstitutional cooperation. With their tailored long-term financing and capacity building approaches, Investors for Impact are fundamental in directly supporting projects and enterprises that develop innovative solutions with a social angle to the climate crisis. Today's presentation of Boan from Dun Foundation and Vincent, the CEO of IWELL, perfectly reflected the important role played by investors and by practitioners. Lastly, but not the least, investors for impact are key players in leveraging private capital through European guarantee instruments, as Paula highlighted within the EIF framework, and in mobilizing additional investment from the public and private sector, as Risto mentioned at the beginning of this session. On a final note, we would like to thank you for being together with us for all the 2020 series of policy webinars, not only for today's session. And we are looking forward to see many of you in 2021, as more highly important topics will be approached already at the beginning of the next year, such as the conclusions on the negotiations for the next long-term EU budget or the main elements of the Social Economy Action Plan. I would like to remind you that the recording of this webinar with all the slides will be available soon on our website. And finally, that a survey will pop up on your screen. We will highly appreciate if you can give 2 minutes to fill it in, as it is a very good opportunity for us to understand what other policy topics will be interesting for you to be addressed in 2021. Thank you for your attendance and have a nice evening.